Hello and welcome to Social Justice in the United States webinar. My name is Gregory Gale. I am the Director of Recruitment and Admissions at the NSU College of Psychology. Today we have a special group of individuals to talk about a very important topic. This presentation is part of a series of webinars hosted by the College of Psychology. Today's webinar is presented in conjunction with the NSU's Division of Advancement and Community Relations. The NSU Alumni Association is home to 190,000 sharks in the world and across the United States. We love our alums and we want them to stay connected and remain involved. Today's webinar is part two of a two-part series on the topic. So on your screen is the schedule for the presentation. So we will be starting momentarily. At 2 o'clock, we will be stopping and answering questions from you, the audience. So let's begin. So the purpose of this webinar is to have a discussion on social justice with Black leaders, with the focus being on solutions. Our panelists were selected based on their expertise and their experience on the topic. So let's meet our panelists. Our first panelist is Representative Gwendolyn Clarke-Reed. Representative Clarke-Reed served in the Florida legislature from November 2008 to November 2016, representing House Seat 92. While in the legislature, she sponsored numerous bills on a variety of social justice issues, including police body cams, civic citation, minimum wage, and education. In 2016, she sponsored a resolution to authorize the Florida legislature to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. She earned her bachelor's degree from Brooklyn College and a master's degree in education from Adelphi University. Our second panelist is Undersheriff Nicole Anderson. Undersheriff Anderson is a 23-year veteran of the Broward Sheriff Office. She joined the agency in September 1996 as a road patrol deputy after serving 2 years as a state trooper with the Florida Highway Patrol. She has a wide range of experience at BSO, working as a field training deputy, supervising the agency's recruitment division, patrol officer, oversight of the court services bureau commander, and most recently as the executive director of the Department of Community Services. In February 2011, she became the first African-American female district chief. In January 2019, she became the first female ever to achieve the rank of colonel. She's the first female to hold the position of undersheriff in the agency's 104-year history. She received her bachelor's degree in legal studies from Nova Southeastern University, go Sharks, and earned a master's degree in organizational management from the University of Phoenix. Our third panelist is Dr. Michelle Cromwell. Dr. Cromwell brings almost 2 years of experience as an equity, diversity, and inclusion scholar practitioner, master conflict coach, and dialogue facilitator. Dr. Cromwell serves as the inaugural Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the State University campus in Plattsburgh. In addition to equity, diversity, and inclusion work, Dr. Cromwell serves as an independent consultant with emphasis on conflict resolution, organizational transformation, crisis management, and diversity and inclusion. Dr. Cromwell has a PhD in conflict analysis and resolution with a specialty in ethnic conflicts, and an MS in dispute resolution, both from Nova Southeastern University, where they were inducted as a distinguished alumni in 2018 for work in social justice and restorative practices. Dr. Cromwell's bachelor's degree is in social work from the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago. Our fourth panelist is the Honorable Grace Carrington. Grace Carrington is a small business owner in the healthcare and insurance industry, currently serving as the state committee woman for Broward County for the Democratic Party, as well as a member of the Democratic National Committee. She is the founding member of the National Congress of Black Women, Broward County chapter. Ms. Carrington is also an active volunteer in the city of Coral Springs, where she resides, and serves as a fundraising chair for the Martin Luther King Jr. Committee, providing scholarships for financially needy high school students. Our fifth panelist is Tracy McNeil. Tracy McNeil is a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Society of New York City in the area of juvenile rights. Ms. McNeil is a former special counsel for the New York State Courts Access to Justice program. She's also worked for the New York State court system for over 6 years. She served on several boards, including the American Civil Liberties Union of Broward County, the ACLU Florida, currently serves in the Voter Participation Project Board, and New Leaders Council 2018 Broward County Fellow. She earned her bachelor's degree in religion from Swarthmore College and her law degree from the Benjamin Cardozo School of Law, Yeshiva University. She has dedicated her career to moving the arc of history towards justice. So, that is a great segue to start our conversation. And so this is how I'd like to frame our conversation. I have been elected President of the United States and decided that I'd be creating a commission to end social injustice in the country. I've appointed all of you to the commission, and so our role is to create the promised land. So with that said, let's start talking.
Who's going to be first?
So let me have Representative Clarke-Reed lead the conversation.
Thank you very much, Greg, for having this conversation. And my role has always been in an elected position, person's position. Prior to the 8 years in Tallahassee, I served 12 years as a city commissioner in the city of Deerfield Beach. So when you're wanting my input to your setting up, I would first start at the very, very local level, at looking at what are the issues that need to be addressed at this level, and then moving it on to the State House. From that perspective, I can say to you, I think that we would be able to establish those programs and priorities that need to be addressed.
I'm gonna stop share so we can see all of our faces. So Dr. Cromwell, lead us to the promised land.
So any good promised land needs institutions, right? And I'm in an institution, and I am in an ivory tower right now. And I think one of the things that we have to do if we want to get to this nirvana is that we have to disrupt institutions. We have to disrupt institutions because very often we feel that some of the things that we're experiencing are the individual level. And that's kind of like that tension between the individual and the system. You know, and my colleague here, Nicole, can probably speak to that. So if we can disrupt those institutions and really have everybody, you know, Miss CLARKE-REED spoke about it. Have people that are working from the grassroots level, from the middle tier and the upper tier really work together. But we have to disrupt these institutions because that is where the problem is, in our institutions and in our systems. And I know that sounds big and amorphous, but nothing can change until we do that.
So how would we actually do that? The panelists, you represent different kinds of institutions. Tell us, how would we actually do that?
This is Nicole. She is absolutely correct, hit the nail on the head. And it started for me years ago when I was the supervisor of the recruitment division. It's fundamental, it's basic. It's been ingrained in us for years upon years, and I'm speaking from the law enforcement aspect. It was very difficult for Black and brown people to come in on the level of law enforcement road patrol. They always wanted to send people that look like us to the jail to work. And if you don't start with a good foundation out there on the streets, it's all gonna go bad. And sometimes we get under the impression that, oh, because their family has been in law enforcement or they have a degree. And I laugh when they say that, because my grandmother said, don't get a degree and be an educated fool. Because a degree does not mean that you are equipped to do this job.
That's right.
So
Right.
what you have to do is you have to be somebody outside of this uniform before you can go and try to affect change in this uniform. Because if you don't know who you are and you don't love yourself, you can't love these people out there. And it starts at the ground level, the road patrol deputy. You know, I've gone up through the ranks, but I know how it is to be out on the streets. And I have not lost that. I go out, I'm in my community. So you have to find people that have a heart for community. And that's where you build your foundation. Because if they don't care about the community, they're not invested in the community.
So I'm gonna pivot over to Tracy. Tracy, can you talk about your role, what you do right now, and talk about sort of, if you were building the roadway to the promised land, what would you be doing?
So just as a point of reference, I am not here on behalf of the Legal Aid Society. The Legal Aid Society of New York City is where I currently work. I am here as a citizen activist. And what I do as my occupation is I represent abused and neglected children at the Bronx Family Court. And the way we do that here, different from in Florida, is I'm not a guardian ad litem where I substitute what I think the child would best work for the child. No, that's the role of the judge. What we do here is direct advocacy. So children can talk, children have opinions, children do not want to go where they're not fed or cared for. Children can understand complex legal concepts if it's explained to them in a way that is age appropriate. So what I do, the same way I would do for an adult client, is I represent their wants and needs in court. If I am a part of the juvenile rights practice of legal aid here in New York City, but what I don't do, but what is done in my office, is also delinquency cases. So when a young person is accused of committing any crime, when I say young person, I mean someone that's so what would I do to address, what would be the solutions? A lot of the solutions are, as Dr. Cromwell noted, is disrupting systems. So what would that practically mean? What that practically means is when there's a mental health issue, send out someone that deals with mental health and have a city department that only does that. If there is most domestic violence issues get called in after the incident is over. So there is more of a need for counselors. There's more of a need for, I don't know, an assessment person, but there's less of a need of some sort of civil governance, police to come in and just sort of determine. And part of that comes in via 911 calls. So a lot it would be is to look at, you know, since this is about social justice, to look across the board at all of the interactions that society has with its government. And a lot of that time is that initial 911 call. And then figure out what would actually be the appropriate agency to send out for that. And what New York has done in a microcosm way is they set up a number of years ago, I hate to give Bloomberg any credit, but 311. And instead of calling 911 for everything under the sun, it was at the same numbers there they could call, or a similar number, to find out, like, is garbage going to be picked up? My sister looks to be having a mental breakdown. What do I do? Where do I go? And a lot of the issues that our officers would be sent out for is addressed by the actual appropriate government agency. Okay. So sort of diverting and helping the citizenry to determine themselves what the correct government agency that would work for them. So look at how citizenry interacts with government, actually figure out where that appropriate government office would be, and then the same way we have a 911 operator, to have a different kind of government operator to sort of help the public begin to go. And just to sort of wrap it up, since we did start with a justice aspect, is part of the reason that people don't feel justice is that they feel like they're not heard. And I went to law school. I studied 3 years the law. There is no way that I know every kind of law. And I see that in a humble place is that the same way that our 911 dispatchers and our 311 dispatchers can't know everything, is to really stop putting that burden on them and put it where it should actually go. So determine government interaction, have a new sort of system out, and then maybe we can look at previous government commissions, post Watts Riot 1965, post LA 1992. The government has already done a lot of research about how communities could better interact with local government as well as federal government. So let's look at that and maybe not reinvent the wheel.
Okay. So Grace Carrington, you are now governor. New York.
I like it.
Yes.
I like it.
So we've just heard Tracy said, you know, we already know what we need to do. So you're governor. What are you going to do?
Well, the first thing I would do, Greg, and I'm so thrilled to be here with all these fabulous ladies of stature. The first thing I would do is address healthcare. I noticed that everybody talked about their pursuit in life and what they would do if they were a legislator or in the ivory tower and all these legal actions. You can do none of that if you don't have health. I think access to health and affordability is the most important thing. And although we now have the ACA, thanks to President Obama, I still think that we are not making it available as readily as we should. We are one of the more civilized nations that really don't care for our seniors, for example. And they are the most beloved people around the world in other cultures. Here, they are our byproduct. And the first thing as governor is to make sure that there are health centers, health clinics, not just one that function on profit, but also function on maintaining. When a Black woman in this country has the mortality having children 3 times to 1 of a white counterpart, that's a problem, because that's where you start. You know, your firstborn, obviously, you have to get good health care to thrive, to be able to learn, to pursue careers in all the spaces that we spoke about. But if you can't thrive in a physical sense, in a health sense, How are you going to be able to pursue all those things? And then the other factors come into place, social, the legal factors, where we're 3 to 1 being killed by police officers, for example. Yes, that's an issue, but the health is more, I think, there's more healthcare disparity, I would say. And those are the issues that we need to really hone in on as we work through the others.
Okay. Representative Clarke-Reed, you sponsored lots of bills. And I was very impressed when I was reading your bio and you sponsored the ERA. I think it's overdue. But talk about sort of your time in the legislature and all the things you wanted to accomplish and sort of some of the barriers that you faced.
Well, thank you, Greg. My time in the legislature really taught me about the state of Florida as far as government at that level. You know, having come from the local level, when I got to the State House, everyone just expects you to erase those years that you spent at the local level, where you really learned the skill, where you really learned how to work with the community and what the community needs really are. And then how you take those needs to the state level and try to work with your counterparts across the aisle. And that's where it all comes in, is trying to get your bills heard in the legislature, in those committees, because if your party is not the party that's in control, your bills will end up at the very bottom of the pile. So it's having to have the ability to work with those persons across the aisle who hold the same position as you do, but have such a very, very different view of what that position means and how one should be affecting the lives of the citizens of the state of Florida. I had several, the civil citation bill that you see on my resume. It took me 3 years to get that bill to even be heard in the legislature and to get it through, and having to have it given up almost to another person in order to move that legislation. Sometimes, you know, we go to the legislature and we have very good ideas and we want to move our bills and what have you. But because of the way it's made up and what you have to understand about, it's not about you, it's about the people who sent you there, that you're trying to effectuate change for their betterment. And sometimes you have to really bite your tongue in what you are trying to do. But fortunately, I was able to get civil citation, which is something that's being used in the state of Florida, as far as particularly I was involved with our juveniles and how they were giving these children records, criminal records, for nothing, for something that your mom might have slapped you on the hand for and told you, boy, don't you do that anymore, or young lady, don't you do that anymore. These children were getting records from the police department. So when we notice that there are things that are systemically wrong in society, we have to be able to step up and say, no, it's wrong. Even if you're the only one standing out there on that limb saying it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. And you just have to continue to beat the bush and say that it's wrong. And maybe somewhere along the line, I'll get Grace Carrington or the undersheriff to come along with me and say, yes, it is wrong, and let's work together. It's that working together on these issues that will move the needle. No one person standing out there can do it by themselves. So we have to unite and we have to talk to each other, even if we have to, you know, say things to each other we don't really mean, but we have to say them in order to get our points across and get things to change. I know that having lived in New York, where Tracy is for 45 years after having come from Florida to New York and now back to Florida, I truly understand what is going on and what has happened. And we have to look at education, educating our community. And we talk about setting up 311 and 211. Do they know what 311 and 211 is all about? Do they know the services that are available? So there has to be that grassroots education. Even the guy under the tree, he needs 311, he may need 211, and he may 911. But we have to let them understand and educate them as to what's out there for them and how do they get connected to these grassroots issues, services that we can help them move forward in their lives. So I think that my vision of your world would be that folks understand what is out there for them, how do they connect to it, and how do we help them to move along further to make whatever this ideal world will be that you're putting together, Greg, how it will move forward. It's fine to stand up and say, yeah, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. Tell me, how do I do it? How do we engage each other in moving the process forward?
If I may speak.
Yes.
You said a lot of things that resonate with me. Number one is community. We as a community allowed the police to control us and do what it is that we were supposed to do as a community. We call the police for everything. Call the police when our child don't want to get out of bed and go to school.
Right.
And that's not a police job. You know, as your neighborhood police officer, I'm going to try to establish a rapport with your kids, with you, so that I can have that dialect and say, hey, you know, why are you doing your parents like this? They're working really hard. Education was not a given for us back in the day. Take advantage of this. That's where we have fallen short as a community. We've allowed the government to dictate to us what is good for us. And we stopped doing those things that our grandparents, our great-grandparents did to keep community together. And if you sit down and you have that dialect, and just like you said, Miss Carrington, elderly people in every other country are the salt of the earth for them. They treat them like royalty. And we just discard our elderly like they're nothing. I am very family oriented. And anyone who knows me knows that about me. If you sit down, if you can't even respect your elder, how can you respect yourself? And that is what has happened in society, where we see things that happen and you have to question and say, well, why did they do that? And it goes back to bringing up society change. We have to stop letting government, and in my instance, law enforcement, run our households and handle our households. Because you cannot call the police for everything, because not everybody is equipped to handle your problem in your household.
Thank you.
And that's why you need to build your community, so that you have community partners that you can reach out and touch for that help, versus calling the police for things of that nature. And let us deal with the real crime and things that are going on. And for so long, police has been all things to everyone. And we dabble in this and we dabble in that. But our priority number one is to keep everybody safe. But we also need to bond together as a community. And that takes me right back to people in the profession that look like the people that they're in their community.
So thank you so much, Dr. Cromwell. You now have a magic wand, and you can recreate society based on what you think our utopia, our promised land should look like. So all the institutional hurdles that Representative Clarke-Reed would talk about, etc., you wave your wand and they disappear. So paint us the picture.
So I just felt like I was in church because listening to Representative CLARKE-REED and listening to Undersheriff Anderson speak about this thing of community, and I think sometimes when they see like someone like me, a scholar activist, so I'm not necessarily just an academic, I'm a scholar activist. And you know, you talk about painting that magic wand. I have to do some of what they were talking about. I have to be in the institution, but I have to be out of it. So one of the things that that we're doing at the end of this month is reaching out to over 5,000 companies between Vermont, New York, and Canada to say, let's have a webinar and let's have a really serious talk, not just a webinar where you sit down and chit chat, but something where you're actually doing something and having deep conversations and then leaving with an action plan. But we're going to be talking about how you are supporting your Black employees, because you bring these Black employees to this area, right, to Vermont and to Plattsburgh. And then I heard, you know, Ms. Carrington talk about making people thrive. We bring people to these areas and then they crash and burn and they can't thrive. And then they can't be their full, they can't reach their full human potential. So
Yes.
the magic wand would be, for me, having leaders that are brave and courageous enough to say that this is what we need to do, even though it might be unpopular, or that, you know, other leaders in your institution may not like it, but you know it's the right thing to do, and you know it's the just thing to do, then do it. So that webinar, at first, I got a lot of like, I'm not sure we're ready for this. And I'm like, that's code for you don't want to do it. But we're going to do it because there is a need. But also reaching out into the community, like Representative CLARKE-REED said, and not just be that person in the ivory tower, but one of my specialties is over almost 20 years of facilitating dialogues using restorative practices, getting out into the community and doing some of that with people that, you know, that I can preach to the choir that might want to come, but also with people that don't necessarily or will not necessarily want to hear some of the things that we want to talk about, but reach across to. So I'm calling names, you know, like Elise Stefanik. I'm saying to her, you can open the door to people that will not come in when I open the door. You know, so working together and recognizing our interdependence. But the last thing I want to say is that until we take on the suffering of the other, this isn't going to change. So at the cellular level, we really have to understand the suffering of people that are not like us and take on the suffering of the other and really work at a level of interdependence. Because, you know, as you said, I can talk about changing systems, but it's how you do that. It's how you do that. So it's getting outside, disrupting systems, but being courageous and brave enough to do the things that you know are right and just.
So my friend Tracy, I just made you Chief Justice, and I've given you a magic wand as well. And so I tell you to make this the best country in the world when it comes to justice. So take it away.
Well, sadly, as Chief Justice, I can't do anything until a particular case is in front of me. But instead, I will be a senior advisor to President Biden. And as this is my magic land, I know this is probably non-denominational in any sort of way in terms of putting forth, but just to further a mythical idea, is that a lot of the issues that we're discussing, healthcare disparities, a lot of the issues that we're discussing about supposedly bringing the government, the police into your homes to help you take care of your kids, I don't think actually addresses the underlying issue of white supremacy. All communities call 911. But for some reason, with wealthier communities, those issues can be addressed. Communities that call 911 because their kid won't get out of bed, lots of times what that is they actually might already have an educational neglect case as a parent against them. So if their child doesn't go to school, their child will be removed. When people call 911 because, I don't know, other things that may sound frivolous, what you don't know is that, oh, if I don't call post this domestic violence issue where I'm actually safe, I could get in trouble with maybe the Department of Social Services because I didn't tell them because I was under review, because maybe I have a Collier issue or another issue. I didn't tell my caseworker that I addressed this other issue the appropriate way. So I have to reach out to try to look like I'm addressing another subsequent issue. These issues are routed, you know, as much as it's like we could play the respectability politics, like we just should care about each other and work together as a community and, you know, appreciate our old people. The issue is that there's a social covenant with the government, and the government is supposed to treat us all the same, and it doesn't. The reason why I'm spidey sense guessing that we're having this discussion now is because there are riots and very understandable peaceful protests happening throughout this country. And the reason why they're happening throughout this country is because people who are doing normal, everyday things are somehow being killed by the government. So what would I ask President Biden to do? I would ask President Biden to look into whether or not we need some sort of Truth and Reconciliation Council the way that South Africa has. Maybe we need President Biden to look into, you know, the FBI had been looking into whether or not ghost skins, which is the technical term for white supremacists who infiltrate different government agencies to further their terroristic agendas. That was being looked into, and this administration has taken this back. We have systemic problems. And when we, which I am into, talk about amongst ourselves, the same way when women are like, what are we going to do about rape? Guess what? Women aren't raping themselves. Excuse me. People of any gender ever, you know, like, I'm sorry, I didn't want to make this individually gendered, but I use the classic idea that we have about race, which is cis male to cis female rape scenario as an example of you cannot ask the traditional victimized to come up with a solution if the aggressor is not going to take it into consideration. So what do I do? What do I think? What I think we need to do is to go back to Representative CLARKE-REED is we do need to talk across the aisle. We need to talk to white America to address the original sin made against people of color, made against indigenous people. And I know that seems so micro, but guess what? We are feeling it on the everyday micro. So I have a very big issue when we talk about everyone using the government, you know, to get their kids out of bed. You know, you're right. It's sadly, it has fallen on our local men and women and gender non-binary police officers to address that on the everyday level. And you're right, maybe we need to take away that from them and take those funds and those other things and put it to where it can be appropriately addressed. And as we do that, President Biden looks into how we can do an overall psychological addressment of what white supremacy looks like on the macro and the micro.
Thank you. So
can I just say one quick thing, and I want to sort of do a +1 on what Tracy was saying, because I think very often when we talk about nirvana, we're talking about the end, the conclusion, right? We're talking about what we want to see. But James Baldwin says, not everything we face we can change, but we can't change a thing unless we face it. And what Tracy's talking about is it's almost like we have to blow this up because it's a lie that we have told ourselves about dominance and supremacy. And, you know, you talk about the contract, right? We all buy into it. And until we disrupt and resist that, ain't nothing gonna change. And I feel that somehow something feels a little different this time, and I'm hoping it is. But, you know, to put a +1 on what Tracy said, maybe we really need to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because these are things that we don't ever delve and dig into deeply. We have the very surface and superficial conversations, but we got to dig deep. So thanks for going there, Tracy.
So I do want, because I know I'm going to lose two of you in a few minutes, I want to talk about wealth, and I want to talk about the distribution of wealth, access to wealth in this country, because I think that's also a conversation that needs to happen. Wealth determines your education, it determines your healthcare, it determines so many things. So let's go to Governor Grace Carrington. Talk about wealth. In this country, a lot of times wealth, the generational transfer of wealth or the attainment of wealth is really associated with property ownership. So talk about wealth in this country.
You know, I'm glad that you came to me, Greg, because the minute you said the first sentence about wealth, I thought about Black Wall Street. And imagine, just imagine the generations of wealth builders if that whole community was not destroyed in such a way. It not only killed the current system, but it killed any future generations of system. And that is by design. Because
Sir Grace, I think we're having
keep
some
a person in
difficulties.
restricted in being active. You're not able to hear me well?
It's going in and out. Your sound is going in and out.
Okay, is this any better?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll try to be still. So when we talk about generational wealth, I think about Black Wall Street, right? And so you mentioned home ownership, and that's the traditional way that we've been doing it, since many of us don't pursue financial education in terms of going to trade stocks. Very few people of our community are stockbrokers or are those people in that line of work. We usually do traditional doctor, lawyer, that sort of thing. And I think that if your zip code determines your aptitude or as far as you can go, that is problematic, because nobody wants to live in a community that is substandard. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so active in mine. And I'm blessed enough to live in the community that I live in, but there's others that might be here in the surroundings of the community that doesn't have that option. And so when we achieve success or wealth, which health is a part of your wealth, believe it or not, we have to learn to educate others. And so the children is what we can help build the wealth with, you know, showing by the first dollar kids get, they want to run and spend. We have to show them how to invest and the types of things to invest with, as my mom would say, that wouldn't go stale, which is like houses, not cars, for example. And so if we educate kids about financial health, I will call it, we have a better opportunity, but we have to start at the very beginning, the very beginning. And I wish that if what happened in Oklahoma would not have happened, I think it would have spread like wildfire throughout the country. And so knowing that history, I think many of us have to go back to that. I remember meeting Gwen CLARKE-REED when I moved here from New York, and she was doing a lot of work in our sorority with getting young women scholarships to go to college. And, you know, that's one of the things. Not everybody can afford to go to college. I can't wait to write my last check to UCF for my daughter. I mean, education is a part of the key in building financial wealth. And that's not to say that you can't be a Mark Zuckerberg and have a great idea in college, drop out, you know, or Bill Gates, you know, messing around in your garage with pieces of this and that, and build something that none of us can live without. So there's many ways to go about it, but for our community, we have to be very succinct in how we're going to train our children so that they can help lift themselves out of poverty, And that is going to take some help from the government as well, though, because we need opportunities. If I see some really smart children, great artists, you know, kids are coding like crazy from our community. But when they go to the bank to get that loan to do their startup, are they going to be level with their white counterparts? Probably not. And so we need to change a lot of that stuff. How we go about it, now that's the conversation we have to have.
Greg, can I just follow up on what Grace was speaking about? You know, when I came back to Florida and went to into the education system here, and I would see our young people talking about, and when they got into high school, you know, their parents here, lawn service is a big business. And a lot of our families, particularly Black families, had lawn service businesses. But instead of wanting their children to continue with that business, they sent them off to college and told them that they needed to become a doctor or a lawyer, not realizing that the business that they were in was going to be that sustaining factor in the community through their family, handing down that business. And so what I've been trying to do is to talk to people who are in business and saying to them, look, even if it's a niece or nephew or somebody, you got to keep this business in the family.
Right.
We talk about moving people and moving to other levels. Yes, but if we don't teach them the worth of what they are doing, it will, you know, they'll sell the business, or you know, they'll get to the point where we have the microwave generation that we just went through. You know, everything has got to be so instant. If I don't get this money right away, I don't want this business, you know? So trying to make them understand what it is for family wealth and family dynamics. Because let's look at it, you know, the big boys in New York, you remember the Rockefellers and all those different people, they handed down their wealth.
Yes.
Handed down into the families. And when I look at the political systems here in this country also, you'll notice that folks that are usually in politics, it's old money. It's old money that's handed down from one part of the family to another part of the family. And Black people just don't seem to grasp that, how we do that. So that's an issue. That's really, really an issue.
I want to just change the topic again, because I know I'm going to be losing two people. And Dr. Cromwell, I want to talk about names. So we have a sort of a conversation going on about changing names, and names especially that are associated with people or activities that we consider to be racist. So we have, for instance, statues we want to move or tear down. There are communities that are talking about changing their names. So I'd love, as part of this discussion about social justice, is it appropriate to change names? Should we do it? Should there be some sort of criteria in terms of should we be changing names? So Dr. Cromwell, do you want to lead that discussion?
And I'm sorry to be looking at the clock as I speak, because I loved being with this powerful panel of women, but I have to jump off in literally 2 seconds. But I want to say that this is like a both and, right? Because the symbols are important, and a name sometime can be triggering, but it also reminds people of a history that was painful. So I think it's important to look at that and to emphasize that, to recognize that and address it. But we're coming back to the same conversation, that the changing of a name, I don't want to say it's superficial or it's shallow. I think it's more than that, but it's not enough. because we're coming back again to this idea of systems and structures. So changing a name doesn't change a system or a structure. It's just a part of the solution. You know, it's just like, I would say that we have some of these commemorative holidays, and we all do these great programming for the commemorative holidays. And the next day, you are microaggressing or treating me like the N-word.
That's
Just
right.
the day after the holiday. So, you know, sometimes we have to go beyond what is at the surface or what's superficial. But I don't want to say that it's not important. It is important because the symbols are important, but it's not enough. And on that note, I want to say to my panelists, I love you. To the attendees, I love you. Fins up. I have to go and talk about access for our students. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye
Thank you so
now.
much.
Greg, I'll take over from where Dr. Cromwell is leaving off to, because it makes a good, you know, it's very thought-provoking what she brought up. And there's two parts of it. Changing names and taking down statues is not enough, but it's a start. And in everything, there has to be a genesis. So you have to start somewhere. And people might not want to outwardly say it, but statues belong in museums. The rebel flag issue, put it in a large frame and put it in a museum. No one is trying to take anyone's heritage away, but understand a heritage such as that is not a positive heritage to our community. And so therefore, we are going to do our level best to make sure that change. And while that'll be uncomfortable for our counterparts, we have to make progress. And changing the names, moving the statutes, that's a part of painful progress for them, welcomed progress for us. And at some point we'll catch up as we continue to dig deep and do the things that are not as superficial as maybe just changing a name or taking down a statute, but it is a start.
I'm going to have Tracy just answer that, because I know she also has to leave momentarily. So is it appropriate to take down statues, and is it appropriate to change names? I mean, what's your point of view on that?
I mean, what is it? Society is always in motion, right? Society is always changing. Society is always determining its values and value systems. And, you know, statues in public spaces basically state what values we are trying to put forth. They state who we venerate. And if we're stating that we don't venerate traitors, that we don't venerate bigotry, that we don't venerate racism, then we don't want to promote those values. And unfortunately, that's what those statues represent. For people to say, oh, well, and they also represent other things. That's right. And that's exactly why with all of those things, they need to be in a museum to be contextualized. Because, you know, just to sort of use the Germany example that is often brought up, there are no statues of Hitler.
Right.
They're just not.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that Hitler wasn't a huge part of German, let alone all of European history. To take these down doesn't say that history didn't happen. To take them down does state what we as a society find important. And that we are stagnant in time. No, I mean, if anything, that's what our founders simply said. Our founders in its initial inception said, sorry, King George, bye-bye. And we are moving on, taking down your statue and becoming who we really mean to be. And I think, you know, we as American society, we as Florida society, we as Broward County society are, you know, what do they say? Birth is painful. And we are in a growing stage, right? And maybe we're redetermining, growing into who we want to be. On that note, I too am going to go. Thank you, Nova, for including me in this. Thank you to the rest of our panel. Thank you again. I, as Tracy McNeil, citizen activist, not Legal Aid Society of New York City, are glad to be a part of this. And it is these conversations where we truly figure out the solutions that you're looking for. So everyone, have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm actually going to sort of pivot over to Under Sheriff Nicole Anderson. So we've been talking about different things, and you know, you were eloquent when you explained sort of the role of the law enforcement. So talk about if, again, you had a magic wand and you could change law enforcement in the world, what would you want to do? And in particular, we're going to be getting questions, I know, concerning how law enforcement deals with people of color, communities of color, etc. So talk about sort of, again, all the institutional barriers are no longer there. What would you be doing? And you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. What we'll be doing is partnering with other facets, because law enforcement isn't the end all be all. There's a psychological component to dealing with people in society. You have to bring individuals that are proficient in that on board to address it. It may come into a 911 call center as a family dispute going on, but the crux of the whole thing would be, it's a money issue. The husband lost his job. So that's why there's heated tension in the house. So not everything rises to the level to deal with people as they are criminals. And that's where we have lost sight, and the training has gone. And you see some of the changes. People are uncomfortable right now, and that's a good thing. But if you can't accept being uncomfortable and work on it and fix it, that's a bigger problem. So if I had the magic wand, it would not only just be for the security aspect with law enforcement, but we have to have other services that's connected to that can go out and be of assistance. If it's a mental health issue, have someone on board with regards to that. And that's why I truly understand when some people get sidetracked when people say defund the police. I don't think that people are talking just do away with the police. People are saying spend some of that money that you're spending on police to help the community with these issues, the financial issues, the mental health issues, things of that nature. And as a government agency, we have to have actionable initiatives that help move us towards that, because if we don't, we're going to continue it over and over and over again. And not to say I wouldn't want someone to call 911 because they're having issues with their children or a family issue, but we shouldn't just be the only resource there. And I've seen it with my own eyes in that people call because they get frustrated because they're calling on their own for assistance from social services and things of that nature. And it doesn't seem to get accomplished until the police get involved. And now you got this open case with regards to child abuse and this, that, and the other, when it didn't have to get to that. People are asking for assistance and not necessarily having to go through the police, but it's coming to a point where it's going through us. And I just think that as a society, if we get services going across the board to help, then I think we'll see a better society. And you're right, it does happen a little different in other communities. And your more affluent communities, that you can go to different community events, community civic groups, and things get taken care of. Right. They don't have those resources in some zip codes. So we're at a disadvantage. And that's where, if it's supposed to be equal rights for all, then that's where the government comes in. You got to make it equal for everyone. If you want someone to succeed, you got to give them the same level playing field. And if that playing field isn't level, that child is already at a disadvantage.
So then Representative Clarke-Reed, what role does the government have in terms of battling social injustice, especially, and we'll just use law enforcement as the example. What role would you say government has in that regard?
Well, government has the role of providing the funds that need to be able to be accessed by these various agencies and various departments in order to fulfill the needs of the community. When you have communities that are slum and blight, and the community development block grant funds are not being used the way they should be for that community in order to better that community, or you're not educating, and it all comes back to educating the community as to what these dollars are for. How can we use these dollars? What is absolutely out there that needs to be done? I can't expect Nicole to come into my community and tell me, you got to do this, you got to do that for your community, when she does not understand my community or does not understand the history of this community and what has been going on. We have to look very deeply at the budget of the state, and where do we see them putting monies? Where do we not need to have a street named after so-and-so or something named after this person or that person? Use those dollars more effectively. It's the effective use of the dollars that you get that makes the difference in your community. Those social justice issues that, as far as right now, we're in this pandemic, and there are people who've lost their jobs, but they cannot get on the unemployment website, to file for unemployment insurance. What is going on there? These systems that should be in place to help people, that they need to be monitored. We need to be, having a wide brush look at all of this. Where are the dollars? Who's spending the dollars? How is this money being accessed, and what is it being used for? And yes, I am not for defunding the police departments, but I am for restructuring, looking at moving things around, looking at, yes, community X and community Y don't look the same. You've got to understand that too. And that those things that are needed in community Y may not be needed in community X. So we have to look at very deeply as to how, when we're talking about doing things for communities, making sure it's what the community needs to have, and to have people in place who understand the needs of the community and understand that when you are a public servant, that it's not about you, it's about the people that you serve.
So I just want to follow up quickly. So obviously funding plays a role, but oversight is also very important. So who's responsible for oversight? Is it the state? Is it the local community? Or is it the agency itself?
It depends upon where the money is coming from. Each branch of government has its own oversight policies. And if those policies need to be redone, then it's up to the legislatures to do that. But it's up to the communities to be sure that when you talk about oversight, that who is getting the dollars and who's spending the dollars and who's in charge of spending the dollars. And am I giving the money continuously to Joe Blow? Joe Blow hasn't been doing one thing for my community, but he's my friend and he's, the person running this organization. And I like that organization. So I'm just going to continue to give the money to them, whether they're doing the job or not. And that's when the community has to step in and really speak up about what is going on.
Absolutely.
Grace Carrington, talk about, again, government's role, political parties' role. Who's responsible, in your estimation, for creating the perfect society or utopia?
I think everybody. I think we can't do it without government. Government obviously plays a role, but it's an interactive role with the community. I think that when we go out to vote, like elections are coming up now, I'm getting quite a few calls because people have not engaged. So therefore they look at a ballot and none of these people mean anything to them, sadly. I know that we're all living our lives. COVID-19 had made, revealed actually, not made, but revealed so many inequities in all the areas that people are experiencing. I think if there's going to be changes, it's going to take government. It's going to take citizen activism. It's going to take communities to band together to make the world that we want to see. I don't think there's a way to do it without any of those entities. And I think that when I hear people talk about, well, what is the party doing? I say to them, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? The party is made up of people, either party. They're all made up of people. And so if people are not engaged, and there are different ways to engage, it doesn't have to be at the level of an elected official like Representative CLARKE-REED or me, you know, with the DNC or the Broward Party. But you can engage in certain levels by simply finding out what is going on. You know, come out of your bubble a little bit, I think. Ask some questions when you don't know. I appreciate the calls I get because that shows interest. People don't want to take a ballot and just go with the one name that they recognize because that person is from their community or have been to their community at one point or another. And so we really have to do our level best, all of us, to educate each other. And I'm in the mindset of each one teach one. And so, you know, when you know more, you do better. And that's my philosophy about where we go.
To all members of the panel, I have a question concerning the judicial system. So social justice in many countries, or I should say, essentially how laws are handled. Obviously, the face of law enforcement is usually the face people see, but the legal system, the judicial system really also plays a role. So talk about how do we create a more perfect society via our judicial system?
Greg, that one is pretty hard. And the reason why that one is so hard is because with the judges, and I like the fact that they're mostly elected with the exception of state and the US Supreme Court. It's really hard because the judges do not get to really mingle with the community unless it is in a nonpartisan setting. And there's not many of those happening at any point. For example, I know that there is something with Broward College that the judges talk to them about civic duty and education and so forth. They haven't been able to...
We're losing you, Grace.
Greg, can I just jump in? We're losing Grace.
Yeah, we're losing you, Grace. Go ahead.
The judicial system, it's she was saying, it's difficult because
but it's really hard with the judges because, okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back, Grace.
Oh, am I? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, finish up, and then I'll chime in after.
No, I was just picking up.
Did you want me to go ahead, Chris?
Faded out about them, the nonpartisan participation of judge candidates, and the whole issue of how one gets to be a judge candidate and move through the judiciary. I can only speak of Broward County of what I've seen. The fact that there is an unequal number of Black judges in this elected to the judicial system here in Broward County. And this is something that we have been trying for a number of years to get candidates, people to run for judge. The political system is not one that you can really just say, I'm going to jump in here at this level and I'm going to run for this particular office. if you have not been through what one might say is understanding the entire political system and how judges, how one gets to be a judge. So never having been a judge, not having the qualifications to be a judge, I think that Grace understands it a lot better.
But the question I really hope to get an answer to is the law enforcement agency is the public face. And so we hear about defunding law enforcement, but the other part of that is in fact the judicial system, where we know that there's racial disparity in terms of sentences. I don't think the laws are specifically written for color in mind, but there are studies that show that individuals, same sort of history, will appear before certain judges, certain courts, and the actual decisions are different. So in terms of social justice, how do we address that?
If I may respond.
By all means.
Pick the right judges.
Well, that's one. But if you have a system that you have a sentencing guideline, then there should be no face on what an individual has done, just the actions of that individual. And if you take, and where we come into play with that is, you know, everybody has the right to face their accuser, to be heard in court. And the fact of the matter, if Black and brown people go stand up in court, it's something totally different. Historically, we have seen that the sentences have been much stronger. But if you do not put a race or gender to something, and you do it based upon specific guidelines, and you are fair, then it's a system that could work. But we're victims of our own biases, and that's what it comes into play, human nature. It's not the system, it's the humans that's running the system. That is why you have such a strong difference in how justice is meted out.
Anyone else?
It's also, I wanted to say, Greg, as we look here in Broward, we're running for, have folks running for state attorney's office. In that state attorney's office, a lot of decisions are made as to how folks are going to be adjudicated. And we have to look at who's there and, you know, what has been the experience of the persons that we are looking to place in these positions. Yes, they're elected, but they are elected as the state attorney to serve everybody in this judiciary circuit here in Broward County. There are positions within the state attorney's office that we really need to be looking on as to who makes a decision as to whether a child gets tried as a child or get a juvenile or gets tried as an adult. These are areas that we have to look at who's sitting there making those decisions. And is that, you know, someplace where we really need to look at restructuring the state attorney's office. So when we see these kinds of things happening, we have to speak out. Regardless of you know, whose toes we're stepping on or whatever. If it's wrong for one, it's wrong for the other. That's my opinion.
So Sheriff Nicole Anderson, I wanted to talk about, you had a role in terms of recruitment. And I want to also bring in the other panelists. If we're working towards a more perfect union, a more perfect society, with organizations that reflect our community, talk about recruitment of individuals. And I'll start off with law enforcement. I think in some jurisdictions we have a shortage of law enforcement officers, but many times law enforcement officers, the community that they serve, they're not generally, they may not be the same ethnic background. And the same thing in judiciary, as we just talked about, and maybe in politics. How do we get people in these places of authority that reflect the community that they serve?
We have to start with our youth. Not to say that they're not adults that are capable of doing the job, but it starts with your youth. If you're at home and you're told, don't talk to the police are bad, you're not going to aspire to want a career in law enforcement. Once the youth get into school, it's going to depend upon the interaction that they have with law enforcement as to whether they don't want to be involved with law enforcement. And I had a conversation the other day with a young lady that mentioned about when she was 15 years old and the bad experience that she had, and she didn't want anything to do with law enforcement. And I thank her for having an open heart, open mind, that that's not her view towards law enforcement. It just made her not want to be a part of it. So we have to get out in the community and establish these relationships and let them see that, listen, it's an honorable profession. There are people that do bad things in every profession that's out there. So you can't label, just like Black and brown people don't want to be labeled for something someone else does. Trust me, law enforcement, we don't want to be labeled for something that someone did that was wrong. We know we have a responsibility to uphold, and we accept that responsibility, but judge me on my merits and what I do. And I think that if we get out and we get with the community and we show them that this isn't just about taking people to jail and locking people up. There are a lot of things that we do that doesn't necessarily deal with arresting people. When you can do something to help somebody and it makes you feel good, that's what this is all about. Not going out how many arrests I can get. And that's why it's so important to get people engaged in their community and to want to be a part of that in their community, because there is some ownership in the community. We do recruiting efforts not only at the high school level, but career days in elementary school, middle school. We go to our historically Black colleges and universities to recruit, because how can you change something if you don't get involved in it? Change is gonna come from within, not outside. You're just gonna make people uncomfortable from the outside, but you can really get under their skin on the inside. So that is what I tell to people that look like me. If you don't get in, it's gonna be very hard to change. Not to say that change cannot happen, but you can affect more change internally than you can externally.
Grace Carrington, do our politicians reflect us? You're muted.
I had a little background noise I had to mute. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I just want to say one thing regarding what Nicole said, and that's always my mantra. You can't change things from the outside. You can only change it within. That's why when, to segue to your question, Gregory, when people say to me, the Democratic Party this, the Democratic Party that, I ask them, you know, why don't you become involved? And why don't you try to spearhead some of the things that you want to see us change? Because you can stand on the outside all day long and say, people should be doing this, people should be that. I say, run for something, you know, get involved. And that's how you're going to be implementing those changes. Does the politicians reflect us? For the most part, we have a great group of Black electeds in the State House. I'm waiting for the transition to the State Senate, where I think CLARKE-REED should have been. I see more and more folks doing more to get into politics at the ground level. I think that most of you know that Joshua Simmons is our first Black commissioner. Well, that's a great thing, but wow, why did it take so long? You know, it's nice to be the first, but we really shouldn't have too much of that. We need youth to get involved, like Nicole talked about. If we talk about civic duty in elementary school, and then junior high, and then high school, then we get this thought-provoking action happening in our youth. And then we can have more politicians like Gwen Clark-Reed, Alcee Hastings, Hazel Rogers, Chevron Jones, and the like. And until we start doing that, And it may not be something that's going to happen from the school board. God knows they have their issues. But I think most of us, I know when my children were in school, I was very active in the school and asked for things that I didn't see that I thought they should have. And the more noise you get, the more action you get. And so that's what's really going to make the changes that we want to see.
Representative Clarke-Reed, your thoughts on getting people of color in places of authority?
Well, people of color have to understand what those places of authority mean. What is it all about? They have to understand that, you know, the blows that you may have to take.
Yes.
You know, and just if you want to stay in the fight, stay in the fight. You have to have an understanding of what the actual goal is. What is it that you're trying to change? How you think that it's best that it can be changed. And you have to be willing to step up to the plate and say to the person on the other side, look, this is what's happening, why this is happening, because the X, Y, and Z is happening. Are you not willing to listen to someone else's point of view? Understand how it affects, let me show it how it affects you, and then how it affects me. And you have to really break it down to people to the very, very basic levels. Because I know when I was in the city commission and I would say to people, and, you know, I would use the term of, hey, did your toilet flush this morning? You know, were you able to turn the water on and brush your teeth? You know, these are things that they didn't even know. They have no idea of how this actually takes place. Where does the water come from? How do you know, where does it go after, you know, I use it? How is this affecting my water bill? I'm paying a water bill. What does it mean to pay a water bill? All of these things that are just day-to-day things that have to be understood, even for a person who is going to run for office. Do I know where the water comes from? Do I know where the water goes? As a person sitting up there, how am I making decisions for my community? It's a whole system of education, and it starts very early. I've been very fortunate for the past 25 years to have a Future Leaders program operating here in the city of Deerfield Beach, where I took 13 to 15-year-olds and had the city to place them in positions, and also worked with my Chamber of Commerce. There are other factors, other entities other than just government agencies. There's Kiwanis, there's, as I said, the Chamber of Commerce, and got them to hire these youngsters during the summer. I was told by, you know, other entities, you know, Career Source directed, no, this could never happen, but it happened. And what has happened now is Career Source has implemented a program. So there are things and ways that we can educate our children, it has to start at the lower levels, at the younger age levels, that we get our young people involved and making them understand how their future and how my future depends upon them.
So I only have two more questions because we're coming up to the end of our time together. And so it's really just a follow-up. If you wouldn't mind quickly telling me, and I'll start with Representative Clarke-Reed, how did you get involved in politics? Who recruited you?
I'm sorry Tracy's not still on here, but as a young person, I was a Girl Scout. Girl Scouting was the program that got me interested in running meetings, how to run a meeting. I became very interested in that. And then Congresswoman, rest in peace, Shirley Chisholm, growing up during her election and being involved there and having seen the need to be involved. But just understanding what a community is about and how I needed to be involved in the community. And believe me, I said a lot of first in Brooklyn. First African-American female elected to the school board in District 18. and serving on community planning boards and working with then Congressman Adolphus Towns and Congressman Major Owens. I had very, very good roots in politics and good examples. So that's how I really got involved.
Thank you. Grace Carrington, how did you get recruited?
I needed a summer job, and my godmother worked in a program for summer youth. She was the director. I'm from the great city of Harlem, New York, the best in the world. And Charlie Rangel was her boss. And I got a couple of summers there, first summer, second summer, and then I was off to college. And I did things at the aftercare program in the evening that Congressman Rangel had started in Harlem. And little by little, I saw how he brought to Harlem everything that was needed. And although I never really aspired to be an elected official, I thought that that was magnificent that he could move the mountains that he moved. And I moved down here in the early 2000s and met a lovely woman by the name of Diane Glasser, who was a state committee woman here, who I know you're familiar with. And she really didn't give me a choice. She said, I've been doing this a long time and you need to take over for me. And I said to her, I'm not sure if I'm interested in doing that. She said, it's about time. We've had over 40 years of white women being the state committee woman. And I think now is the time to make this change. And I want you to hang with me a little bit and learn Florida politics, because it's different from New York.
I think we've lost you, Grace.
It absolutely is. And then I'm gonna have you do this thing.
Grace, I think we've lost you. Your sound is going in and out.
Yes. I'm done.
Okay.
I stopped talking.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. But that was the ending of my story. That was the ending of my story.
And Undersheriff, how did you get recruited?
Actually, my goal was to become an FBI agent. The investigative aspect, the undercover intrigued me, and that's what led me to initially get into law enforcement. As you stated before, I started out as a state trooper with the Florida Highway Patrol, and then I came over to the sheriff's office. Once I came to the sheriff's office is really what got my heart into community. I was assigned to the city of Lauderdale Lakes and met some wonderful people in the city and got a chance to just get my tentacles out there and get with the community and do some great things. And that is what keeps the drive in me, knowing from whence I came as a road patrol deputy. And as I continued up the ladder, promoting within the agency, never leaving that community vibe. I still have people that I can go back and speak with and talk to. So I think for me, it's always been ingrained. I am a South Florida native. I was born and raised here in South Florida, and I'm a proud graduate of Dillard High School. And everybody who knows me know I'm a Panther for life. And there is some historical aspects to community with regards to Dillard. My grandparents went to Dillard. My parents went to Dillard. I went to Dillard. So it's one of those things where community has been ingrained in me. As far as the pathways in my law enforcement career, I've had an awesome mentor. I know most people know Judge Elijah Williams.
Yes.
I know him on a personal level. That is my cousin.
Nice.
And he is awesome. He is an awesome mentor. I can always run things by him. I respect his opinion, and he keeps me focused and grounded with regards to, you know, policies that come about, and I can run something past him and know that he's not going to say something to me just because we're related. If I'm wrong, he's going to tell me I'm wrong, but he's going to tell me why. And that's what I appreciate, because if you don't tell me the why, I'm bound to do it again.
Right, right.
So you have to have good people around you that lead you. Although he's not per se a law enforcement officer, he is in the judiciary. And I've tried to mimic the way that he's carried himself and, you know, acquire knowledge and pass it along and just be a blessing to people. That's what it's about.
Well, I would like to thank all of you for a wonderful, productive, delightful, just wonderful conversation. We do this as a community service, and we think it's very important to have these kinds of dialogues. So Representative Gwendolyn Clarke-Reed, thank you so much. Under Sheriff Nicole Anderson, thank you so much. And the Honorable Grace Carrington, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful presentation. I'd also like to thank the NSU Division for Advancement in Community Relations for collaborating with this. For more information about these webinars, please visit us at www.nova.edu/sharks. Thank you so much again for participating, and please be safe. Have a good day.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.